Hello everybody and welcome back to this channel. My name is Sarah. This is the fourth video in the series on how I made my wedding dress, and I'm so excited because it's starting to take shape. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I will link the playlist here. And to summarize, basically in the first video I figured out what I wanted to make and I got help drafting the pattern. And then in the second video I figured out what kind of fabrics I needed and then where I bought them. And then in the third I assembled the bodice and figured out especially how to do the draping of the tulle in the front and the back bodice, which was a fascinating process and something that I actually really enjoyed doing, so surprise there. And in this video I want to talk all about how I assembled the 8 layers of the skirt, so the 7 layers of tulle and the 1 layer of lining fabric, how I cut it out, assembled it, attached it to the bodice piece, and then a good part of this episode is also how I figured out all of the fitting problems that arose, including and not limited to how I could not easily zip up the side seam and how the zip was ready to burst. It was so tight. So stay tuned. So where we left off, I had just finished assembling the bodice, so finishing the draping of the tulle, and then I attached the lining to the top edge of the bodice in the front and the back, and that effectively fixed the draping in place. And I did all of the finishings I possibly could without first attaching the skirt, so that it would be easier to manipulate and handle just as the bodice piece, because I knew once I attached the skirt it was going to become a beast. And so I was ready to start working on the skirt. I first wanted to prepare the fabric, so iron it lightly. I used a very cool iron for the tulle because tulle does melt easily, but with ironing and cutting it out, it actually wasn't that bad. So once I had finished prepping all the fabric, I was able to lay it out and cut it, and I still had a few layers to cut out. So 2 layers of the medium weight tulle that would go in between the 2 other tulles, and then 2 layers of the stiffest tulle that would go underneath the layers, and then the lining. And it went well. It just took a long time because laying out each piece and cutting it out took a few hours. And with the lining especially, it took a little bit longer because the width of the lining wasn't wide enough for the front pattern piece. And I knew this in advance, but I really wanted to work with this fabric, so I figured I would just piece that little corner that didn't fit. And so what I did was I took a piece that was on the same grain and I fitted it, I laid it kind of over the existing piece that was already laid out with the pattern, and I traced the extra bit that needed to be added to it, and then I added a seam allowance of about 1 centimeter on each side, and then I sewed it up together later and made sure that that seam was as smooth as possible, so no tension. And this fabric definitely created some tension at the seams, so I was very careful sewing that, and then pressed the seam allowance apart and then finished the edges of the seam allowance as carefully as possible. But I figured that it was okay to piece that piece because it was in the interior of the gown and it wouldn't be visible to anyone. I would only know about it. So once all of the pieces were cut out, I was able to start sewing up the skirt. So sewing up one of the side seams and leaving the other one open for the eventual zipper insertion, and then gathering the top edge so that I could fit it to the bodice. Hi everybody, so my wedding is now officially in 4 weeks, and I still have a lot to do, but I think things are progressing nicely. I've just encountered a few things. Well, things aren't going bad, but most of the important parts of the event are going well. It's just I've just discovered that the makeup and hair artist that I had planned to work with, it's not going to work out, and so I'm going to have to do it myself because there's no way I'm finding someone in 4 weeks. So yeah, there are just things like that where it's extra work that I have to prepare. But anyway, oh man, the dress is going well. I have just finished cutting out all of the pieces of the skirt and the tulle and the lining, and I've sewn the back pieces to the front pieces at the right side seam, leaving the left open for the zipper. And so here it is. Here are all of the pieces of tulle that I will now need to attach together to create the skirt. I have 3 different kinds of tulle here, so the lightest and most accurate color on top. The second layer is actually lighter and more flexible than I thought it would be. I thought it would be less than the top layer, but it's this porcelain sort of off-white color, so I don't want it on top, but I do really like it. And it was actually the cheapest. It was €9 per meter versus 30, so great. And then I have the most rigid tool, I hope it's not touching the microphone, the most rigid tool here on the bottom that will add volume. And it's also in a more accurate color that I wanted, so more of a porcelain color. It's not, it looks maybe optical white here, but it's porcelain. And yeah, so those are all the skirt pieces. And then I have the lining pieces for the skirt here in this cotton and silk blend toile. And then I have my bodice here. So I have finished sewing the upper edge of the bodice. Oh man, it's on the floor. The floor is clean. So this is the bodice piece that I have somewhat assembled. So I have attached these straps to the front and the back. The back is turned inside out. Yeah, with the lining pieces attached, it's a bit difficult to show you. It's not all together yet, but this is basically the back with the wrap. Let me hold it there. So this will be the back. The lining is kind of floating free here. It's just attached at the top. That's why it looks a little bit messy. But I have the straps attached, and I'm being very careful not to put too much weight on the straps. I did leave these straps only basted at the back seams, just in case I need to adjust that, because I know that that's a very important factor in the way that the bodice sits from all my Ogden camis. And yeah, I have pick stitched the edge of the bodice so that the lining won't roll to the front once it's all attached. So now the next step is to baste all of the lining, or all of the skirt pieces together, so that I can control the layers a little better, and then sew it to this waist seam. So the tool with the outer bodice pieces, and then the lining to the lining, and then somehow fix it at the waist. I want to insert a zip on the side, and then I'll be able to try it on and see if it actually works, because for now, trying on the bodice without the weight of the skirt doesn't really tell me very much, and so it's very nervous, like working so hard on this dress and not really knowing what it's going to look like in the end. And I did try it on, and I think that I do need to work on a little bit of the shaping of the tool here with some invisible stitches in the front, so that it's not just like one big mass, like giant pleats of tulle in the front. But I think it's going well. Yeah, I'm just, ooh, it's getting tiring. I've been working on this project usually at night after work, and doing a lot of nighttime sewing, burning the midnight oil. And I'm really tired. I want to rest, but I can't because I only have 4 weeks and so much to do. Oof, stay. But yeah, it's going well. And I did make a mistake. I have made a few mistakes that have been a little bit costly. Like with the lining pieces, I cut 2 front pieces instead of 2 back pieces, and so I had to buy another 2 meters of lining, and it's like 30 euros a meter, so that was expensive. Or I bought 7 meters of the wrong tulle. I don't know how I did that. I think it's because I had a whole list of tulle that I was researching, and I must have clicked on the wrong link, but I double checked, and I just don't understand how I did that. So I have 7 meters of the wrong tulle, and I had to buy 7 meters of another tulle, and that cost me a few €100. So yeah, it's a little bit more costly, and the mistakes I'm making have much bigger consequences than on regular sewing projects, but for now, no huge errors. Everything's fixable, just a little bit expensive, and it's gonna be okay. So here is my progress so far. It is about 3 weeks until the wedding, and I feel a little bit calmer. I've just had my bachelorette weekend in the sun in the south of France with my friends, and that was such a treat. And so I feel, yeah, a lot more zen about this wedding. The stakes were getting really high, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself before that weekend, and now I feel a little bit more at peace with the projects that are not going to get done and the details that I've just had to let go of. But basically, I've finished attaching these skirts to the bodice, and this was a whole thing because I had to gather each piece of the tulle individually and then baste them together, all 7 layers, which was difficult to do, and then sew them all up to the bodice. And then once I did that, which took about 5 hours, if not more, I realized that one of the pieces of tulle was attached the wrong way around, and so I had the train in the front and not in the back. And oh my goodness, a few tears were shed. But I managed to unpick it, put it the right way around, redo the entire work, reattach it, and here it is now. The lining isn't attached on the inside, so that's why it's a little bit floaty, and my mannequin isn't my size, so it's not exactly going to look like this on me. I also haven't inserted the bust cups yet, so this is just so that I can show you how the skirt lays. I'm really happy with the tulle that I picked for the skirts. This is 7 layers of tulle. There's 2 layers of rigid tulle, 3 layers of medium tulle, and then 2 layers of this really soft, beautiful porcelain colored tulle. And I'm really happy with the color. I think that this combination of tulle, even though they're all different kinds of color porcelain, it goes together really well. It is slightly transparent, but I'll worry about that later. So the next step is to insert the zip at the side seam, and so I'm going to have to baste the 7 layers of this tulle together again because it's really hard to find the edge and hard to work with. And then I'm going to hand stitch the lining down. This fabric is just so soft and lovely against the skin. I'm really happy that I chose this one. And then I'll be able to try it on and figure out what I need to adjust. The back turned out really well, I think. Let me see if I can turn it for you. I'll just hold it here. But yeah, I think the cross in the back is really nice, and it arrives at my lower back, and I think it's really pretty. I think the straps are the right length. Here they're just basted in, so I need to be careful not to put too much weight on them. But I think they're the right length, so I can now sew them in permanently. And then I have a lot of work to do at the bodice. So basically I need to, once I finish sewing down by hand the lining on the inside, I need to add the bust cups here, and I'm not so sure about the boning. So if you can't really see here, but it's not laying flat against the mannequin or close to the mannequin underneath the bust, and it does the same thing on me. So I'm a little bit worried that the shape is a little bit too round. So maybe I can fiddle around with removing the boning, or yeah, I think that sewing the pleats down individually here underneath the bust might help as well, and I will need to work the pleats by hand because right now they're not laying in the way that I want them to. And then I don't think I'll add any extra embellishment to this dress. I was planning originally on adding something at the waist, like fabric flowers or something. The dress that I tried on in the shop had an applique here to mark the waist, but I think that, so I bought these flowers. They're off-white, and then they're a little bit of more lavender blue. I'm not sure about adding the blue, but anyway. I was thinking of adding them kind of here, concentrated around the waist, and then kind of strewn across the skirt pieces, but I think actually that because the flowers are made out of more of a rigid fabric and the tulle is so soft, I think that the tulle by itself is much nicer. I don't think I need to embellish it. So this is going to be simpler than I originally planned, but I think that with the pleats here and the gathers here and the way the tulle hangs, which I'm really happy with, I won't need extra embellishment. So yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. This is the sort of thing where the stakes are really high. I don't have a plan B. I've already spent so much money on this fabric that if it doesn't turn out well, I'm gonna be really upset. But I think it'll be okay. So far when I try it on, I'm happy. And yeah, I'm gonna continue, keep my head up, and wish me luck. Okay, so here it is on. I'm pretty happy globally with it now that the waist seam is attached, but there are a few problems that are a little bit more worrying than I thought they would be. So basically the waist seam is tighter than I thought it would be. It's definitely straining at the zip here. It's not uncomfortable, like I can move around. I've just had dinner, so my belly's full. It's right below my ribs and above my stomach, so it doesn't hinder breathing or eating or moving. But yeah, it's definitely really, really hard to zip, and I'm worried that the zip's gonna burst here. It's definitely strained on this side. So I'm thinking of just taking out a tiny bit right here at the waist seam. I'm thinking it's not worth it fiddling with the right seam. I already have it finished up at the top and the boning on the side here, so that's gonna be a lot harder to modify. But I'm wondering if that's not gonna shift it a little bit. I don't want it to be like off. So I'll have to think about that. But I've also noticed that it's too wide here up top. It doesn't feel like it's against my skin at all. It's definitely gaping a bit here. So you can see like on the side here as well, there's definitely a lot of gaping. But so I'm thinking of modifying the side seams here. So if I show you this side, moving the zip backwards a little bit, just on one side, so that this side gets kind of tucked in a little bit more. Because I can't really modify the back. Here's the back for you. I've placed a pin where these two are supposed to coincide up here. If I pull them together anymore, it's gonna warp them down here, which is annoying. I think I also need to make the straps a tiny bit tighter. I see that they're kind of loose here, and I don't want them falling off my shoulders all night. But yeah, I think once I tighten it up a little bit up here, hopefully I won't feel so naked on top, because right now it feels kind of like the bust isn't at all against my body, and that it'll just like move around independent of my body and I'll just be flashing everybody all night. So it's a little bit discouraging because this pattern was made specifically for my body measurements, and I don't understand what went wrong. I stay stitched everything. I was very careful. I took all the precautions, and so I'm a little bit discouraged, but I know how to fix this. It's just gonna take time. And yeah, I'm really happy with the skirt. I haven't finished doing the side seam yet, and the lining is still hanging free, so it's not fully representative of what it's gonna look like. But I'm happy with the amount of volume and the different layers, so that's good. And I don't think it's too tight. Like I can feel it warming up with my body and kind of like expanding a little bit. But yeah, more work to do, more than I anticipated, and I should probably get to it. So at this point, I stopped filming altogether. I was way too stressed. I had about 3 weeks until the wedding, and I was not okay. So I will recount to you here, calm and collected, all of the modifications I made to the bodice. So basically what I did was I unpicked that zipper, which was ready to burst at any moment. It was unusable after that. And I let out the seams about a centimeter at the waist, so where it was attached to the skirt. And then I took out about 2 centimeters at the top of the bodice. So I moved that seam backwards, almost diagonally, from the waist seam to the top of the bodice at the armpit, backwards. And I think it worked out best that way because there wasn't a hole, it was already slanting a little bit forward, and by moving that backward, it stayed straight. And so I think there was definitely a little bit too much extra fabric in the bodice. And it worked out that way, but I did have to unpick everything, the boning channels, the pick stitches, that was the edge stitching that I had done by hand at the bodice seam edge, and then redo it, reinsert the boning, and reinsert the zip after buying a new one. But once I figured that out, it was good to go. I was so relieved. I did a little happy dance, and I was able to move on to the next steps with about 3 weeks left to sew. So that is how I assembled the skirt. This was definitely the hardest part of the project. I was under a lot of pressure, and I had to really use the patience that I was capable of, and problem solving under a time constraint and stress management during this period, because oh my goodness, I had anticipating finishing this dress with a lot more time before the wedding, and every single step it took twice as long as I anticipated, and oh my goodness. Anyway, give yourself, if you ever do this project, give yourself ample time. So in the next video, I will show you all of the finishing details, including leveling out the hem, which is not a detail. It took a very long time. It took a whole day and even more, for example, even with tulle where you don't need a hem. But also how I added a bustle detail to the train so that I could bustle it during the dancing part of the night. And then also how I added a loop to the end of the train so I could fix it to my wrists as well. And then how I cut out and sewed my veil, which I was working on until the day of the wedding. But then hopefully in the next video, I will be able to show you the final reveal and the final full-length dress on me, and all the little details so that you can see it in motion and in its full final form. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you are well, and I will see you again here soon. Bye-bye.